Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the conservation podcast, the show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and welcome to the final episode of Series 5, the final episode of our Africa series. I'm so sorry, I can't believe it's coming to an end so soon, but I can only make it up to you by delivering you one of my favourite interviews that I have ever done with with a wonderful, amazing, fabulous guest. So I hope you'll forgive me for it being the end for now, because I am joined by the absolutely brilliant Dr Gladys Kalema-Zikusoka, Uganda's first wildlife vet and the author of Walking with Gorillas. She's here to tell us all about her journey from the little girl who would play with the neighbours' Ververt Monkey all the way to world-leading scientist. A world-leading scientist who's worked with some of the most incredible people like Dr Goodall and spearheaded some of the most interesting and unique projects that we've ever talked about on the show. We also talk about her organisation, Conservation Through Public Health, the essentiality of interdisciplinary working, the importance of working with communities as well as government stakeholders, and how tourism has changed since the COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, we bring it all back to the little animal that inspires us all and inspired the show, the pangolin, and we hear about Dr. Gladys's incredible experiences with it that make me very jealous, and we talk about why everybody should pursue their conservation dreams. Before I let the interview play, I also want to say a quick thank you to everybody who has supported the show this series. Whether it be through sharing, subscribing, reviewing, or listening, you've all made the biggest impact on the show. You've helped the show reach over 100 countries now. You've made my life so much brighter and fuller, and I can only thank you for all of that. Thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed yet, this may be the end of Series 5, but you know there's going to be so much more. So please, subscribe. I'm already planning Season 6, so wherever you're listening, subscribe. Follow the show on social media at Pangolin Podcast. Leave us a nice review, do whatever, just stick around because you know I'm not done yet. You know there's still lots more talking inside me, and I'm so excited to keep the ball rolling. I can't believe we're at the end of this series and there's going to be another one soon. So thank you. Love you all. Thank you. Now, before I get too emotional about the whole thing, I just want to say thank you so much, one more time, to everybody and to all of the amazing guests we've had this series, all the way back in March with Charles, and ever since there with Lucas and Rex and everybody who's come after that, and the replay episodes with the Giraffe Conservation Foundation and the Lemur Conservation Network. Everybody, thank you so much for supporting the show. Christine and everybody, you've just been all so wonderful and amazing. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of you for listening. And without further ado, one last time, let's get started. And welcome back to the show. I'm now joined by Dr Gladys Kalema-Zikusoka, whose memoir, Walking with Gorillas, The Journey of an African Wildlife Vet, has been taking the conservation world and the world at large by storm. I feel like I've heard so many people talking about you recently. You're popping up on social media and all over the place, and so it's really exciting for me to get to kind of sit with you and chat about the book and some of your other work. And thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Jack Baker. It's been wonderful. It's great to know that you're from Scotland, because I've just been in Edinburgh. We had a book event at the Waterstones in Edinburgh last Thursday, which went really well. And now they have signed copies for everyone because they got me to sign so many copies before I left.
Yes. We were just chatting about that. I need to go along. I'm going to go along and pick up a copy because I feel like there's nothing better than having a book signed by the author. I have like my prized possession just now on a shelf is I went into a bookshop in Edinburgh recently and they had signed copies of David Attenborough's latest book. And
Yes.
it sits on like a plinth now in my house, so I need to go along and pick one up. And I'm so excited to have you here to kind of chat alongside the signed copy of the book. I'll have this to remember you by as well, so it'll be fantastic.
Wonderful.
But no, thank you so much for being here. I guess like to get us started, I gave you a brief introduction there as to kind of the book and who you are a little bit, but I always think it's best to hand over to you and the guest because you know who you are and you know your work a lot better than I do. So could you introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners, tell them a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
I'm Dr. Gladys Kalema-Zikusoka, founder and chief executive officer of a grassroots NGO and charity called Conservation Through Public Health. We promote biodiversity conservation by enabling people to coexist with gorillas and other wildlife through improving the health of the people and improving the health of the wildlife and the livestock and the community livelihoods so that people can not have to enter the forest to poach or collect firewood. And the reason we started Conservation Through Public Health is because we found out that people and animals were making each other sick. My first entry into conservation was setting up a wildlife club actually, and then setting up a veterinary unit in the Uganda Wildlife Authority as their first vet. And that got me really, it was an amazing first job. But it also got me to understand how important people were in conservation and how we needed to address the needs of people if we're going to keep the wildlife healthy and their habitat secure.
Yes, that's fascinating, and it's so interesting to hear that not only was it your first job, you were the first person to do it in Uganda, I believe. Like, so that's it. It must have been kind of an intimidating but exciting opportunity to be like, I will be the first. And I wonder how you, when obviously now kind of you've got your book and people are hearing your story and kind of you'll go on to inspire kind of probably the next generation of vets in these kind of roles, but how did you first get into it? Because I imagine like a lot of the time people look up to somebody and that's how they decide what they want to be. They look up to their parents or they look up to a celebrity or they look up to somebody they know. Like who inspired you and how did you get interested in this, being the first at it? That's so interesting to me.
I would say that I grew up in a home with lots of pets. My elder brother also loved animals, so he used to bring stray cats and dogs home. And at the age of 12, I felt like I wanted to be a vet. And then I got an opportunity to set up a wildlife club. But even before that, we got an unusual pet across the road, a Ververt Monkey. And Ververt monkeys are very common in Uganda. In fact, people consider them as pests because they come and eat people's mangoes and everything there. But at the time in the 1970s, this particular Ververt Monkey was owned by our next door neighbor, the Cuban ambassador and his wife. And he always used to like to come home and cause havoc. He would pull the cats and dogs' tails, steal food from the kitchen. He was a very naughty monkey. And because I was around 8 years old and my sibling I follow was 5.5 years older than me, we were not really playing together. And so the animals became my companions, if you could say. And so the monkey used to like coming home to play with me as well, because at the Cuban ambassador's home, there were no children and pets. And our home had all these interesting things for the monkey. So one time I was playing the piano, practicing, and I felt like I wasn't alone. And I saw the monkey was looking at me in the window. So I said, let me see what he'll do. So I came out of the room and to see his reaction. He sat down on the stool and played one note. And I was like, whoa, he's so intelligent. He played one note with one finger. And I was like, not only do his fingers look like mine, but he can actually play the piano. So of course I ran back and he ran across the road. But it was my first entry into how fascinating primates can be. And then I got an opportunity to set up a wildlife club in my high school in Uganda, Chibuli Secondary School. And that was a life-changing time for me because we took the students to the national park. And it was one of the first national parks created in Uganda. It's called Queen Elizabeth National Park, named after the Queen of England. And when I was in the park, it was amazing to be there with nature. And the children were about 20 of us with the biology teacher. But what kind of shocked me is that there were no predators. So there were no lions, no leopards, and they said they had been poached and killed. Most of the elephants had gone to neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. And they said that we could actually have walking safaris, which is really wonderful to walk in the bush. But I felt sad that there were not as many animals I expected to see. And so it made me, I felt like maybe if I'm a vet who works with wildlife, we can bring the wildlife back. But at that time, that role hadn't been there in Uganda. But I felt, if I could attend to animal welfare, wild animals, I could make a difference. And then I started vet school in the UK. I went to Royal Vet College, University of London. Very exciting. And we were mainly, of course, being trained on domestic animals because that's the main animals that vets work on, not only in UK, but all over the world. But they did allow me to work with animals of my choice in the holidays. So when I came back to Uganda, Christmas holiday, I worked with captive chimpanzees in the Entebbe Zoo, which is more like an orphanage. And over there, they had a lot of chimpanzees which were victims of the bushmeat trade. They killed the mom and eaten the mom, but the baby's too small to eat. So they try and sell them baby. And those babies ended up at the Uganda Wildlife Education Center. Now it's called the Uganda Wildlife Education Center. And what I learned from that is how intelligent they were also, just like Poncho. They used to like escaping from the cages because they were flimsy cages. When you weren't looking, they'd open the fence and run out. And then you'd have to bring them back in, and they like being hugged when they're brought back in. And I thought they're intelligent, but they also need their mums. They were still quite young. They're so needy. They wanted to be cuddled. Then after that, a year later, I got a chance to work with wild chimpanzees in Budongo Forest under Professor Vernon Reynolds, who was an Oxford professor who had started the Budongo Forest project. But during that time, I found out that there was a talk for Dr. Jane Goodall. They advertised it at the vet school, saying that someone's going to be talking about chimpanzees in Tanzania. And I got very excited about that. I'm like, wow, I really need to watch this. So I went to the talk. I got my sister to come with me. She was doing a master's in business administration at London Business School. I was like a bit scared to go on my own, but I convinced her to come with me. So there's a talk about animals in Africa. So she came. And after the talk, her and I were the only Africans in the audience. So after the talk, I insisted on going to meet Dr. Jane Goodall. I bought one of her books, and she was very happy to see me. Then I got so inspired by her work, and I thought, this is possible. You can actually go out and work with animals in the bush. It's really possible to do that. And so I went ahead and told her that I'd been in Budongo, and it turned out that she knew Professor Vernon Reynolds very well. And she wanted to also find out, can you hear the noise?
A little bit, but it's a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
But it's just starting.
I can keep
what
quiet as it goes. It's just a plane flying over. It's
someone. That's fine. I might leave this in because it adds context for like where you are. Like that's so.
Okay.
Where is it that you are that there's planes flying overhead?
Okay. And so after I told her like I knew Vernon and I was just so excited about it all. Then 2 years later, I got to work with the mountain gorillas in Bwindi, and that was a life-changing experience for me because when I got to work with them, I read about the late Dr. Dan Fossey, who, together with Dr. Jane Goodall, were considered the trimates of Professor Louis Leakey. There was another lady called Dr. Brigitte Gaudikas, who studied orangutans. I also went to her talks in London, and I was just being inspired by these two very dynamic ladies, plus the legend of Dr. Dan Fossey. So when I got to Bwindi, I felt, okay, I'm kind of doing what they were doing, several years ago. So I think I would say that seeing women like me going out there and doing these things in the bush gave me a lot of courage and inspiration. And so it was a combination of factors that led me to where I am. But I could say that when I did get to Bwindi and I saw how vulnerable the gorillas were to human disease, Because actually when I got there, I wasn't feeling well for a week, so I couldn't even see them myself. And my supervisor, who was also a woman, a direct supervisor, she dropped me off. She was a vet, wildlife vet. She had been working as a vet in Rwanda with Mountain Gorilla Vet Project, which was started on the request of Dr. Diane Fossey when she saw gorillas were being snared. When she came to Uganda, she was now starting a new NGO called International Gorilla Conservation Program. She was the country director. And that NGO was starting a new way of conservation within Bwindi, which was engaging communities by making sure they benefit from tourism. And so her NGO was setting up proper tourism guidelines to make sure that people are healthy and they follow guidelines when they visit gorillas, but they were also helping with community conservation. And they were helping the Uganda government to set this up. So she dropped me off, introduced me to everyone, and collected me 1 month later. And by that time, I had learned how to look after myself, how to engage with people, how to conduct research on my own. I'd got to meet the gorillas, which was totally amazing. And I'd got to understand how tourism is contributing to conservation. So at the end of it, I felt, why don't I just become a full-time wildlife vet so that I can, the gorillas, which are so few in number, I can help to increase their numbers. Because I felt that they were just so few in number, and there were only about 300 in Bwindi at the time, 650 overall. And I felt if we don't do something, these animals are gonna go extinct. So it was a combination of factors that led me to where I am. And so when I wrote to the executive director of Uganda National Parks, who also gave me permission to do this research, I was looking at parasites in gorillas visited by tourists, and 2 tourist groups and 1 research group, and parasites and bacteria. When I sent him my report and I said, you need a vet, and this is what a vet does. And he was like, a vet does for wildlife. I was very excited when 3 weeks later, because those days there was no email, he sent me a letter saying, your job is waiting for you. I was like, wow, this is so exciting. So that's kind of how it all happened.
And it's an amazing story. And it's interesting because it proves so many of the things of like, I feel like we talk a lot about why it's important for like young people to be exposed to nature and see people who inspire them and see people who like they can relate to and they want to be like, and they want to be kind of inspired to be. So it's amazing to see that kind of all of these things add up and make your story. So it's like you are living proof of all of these things that I feel like get talked about a lot of the time, but it's sometimes hard to find the proof of. And so it's amazing to hear that, like, yes, it's a fascinating story. And I think it's really interesting how you've kind of weaved together these kind of like love for wildlife and then the health aspect, and then all of it comes together. And then the understanding of not just wildlife health and not just human health as these kind of separate bubbles, but also the understanding then of kind of all of these things interact with each other and all of these things go alongside, and that we're not 2 separate things. We all exist on this planet together. It's really, really interesting. Really, really interesting.
Thank you.
And yes, I feel like I could spend hours just asking you, but like, what's it like to meet Jane Goodall in real life? But we won't go down that route. I feel like that's a whole other conversation. What I want to ask you about is your work today, and I want to. I guess specifically, the thing that kind of interests me out of the thread that kind of came through all of that is, as I was saying, the health aspect. And a concept that I've heard mentioned kind of around your work a lot of the time is this idea of One Health. And you've talked about kind of public health and all of these things coming together. And I wonder if you could explain what One Health is and how that comes into the work as well. And yeah, what is it for the listeners? Because I think it's a really interesting thing to talk about.
Yes. Okay. And actually, before I go into that, I'm just so excited that Dr. Jane Goodall wrote the foreword for the book.
I saw
having that we're talking about her, it was just amazing. It was. Yeah, she was the most perfect person to write the foreword.
I was at an event last year, and they gave one of the prizes that they gave away was one of the they had like a raffle, and they were giving away one of the Jane Goodall Barbie dolls, which are like made with sustainable plastic, and I was like, I want one of those. And there is I think she's just one of those people that it must have been such an honor for like her to have inspired you to follow this path, and then for her to write this thing. That's amazing. Like, it must have been incredible.
Really, and it is a really amazing forward because she writes so well, and she knows she's been following my work for so many years. So no, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I would say with One Health, it's something that I discovered. Actually, to tell you the truth, before I even started working professionally as a vet, I started to discover One Health. When I got to Buwindi Forest, and as soon as I arrived at the forest and I was coughing and sneezing, I just thought, what is going on here? My throat was burning, and I could not, I wasn't allowed to see the gorillas. And I thought, after coming all this way, wanting to see the gorillas for so many years, I may actually not even see them. And there were no clinics there at the time, so I couldn't even go for antibiotics to get better quickly. I just had to get better naturally. That was very difficult for me. I had to just keep going with stories about the gorillas that people were telling me. They did this today, the Peace Corps volunteers. They did this today, that today, and taking my sample pots to the rangers to collect samples, non-invasive fecal samples from the night nests. So when I finally got to see them, and I was like, now I understand why I needed to be healthy to see them. And I was hired as the first vet. The reason why Dr. Droma was convinced I should be hired is because they had it in their plans to hire a vet, because gorilla tourism had just begun and they were concerned that tourists could bring a fatal flu such as COVID-19. So they thought they needed a vet to make sure the gorillas are healthy and not picking up diseases from people, especially tourists coming in from abroad. But so that's why another reason why they felt they should hire me, although I pushed the issue. They probably hired me sooner than they were going to hire a vet, because I wrote him and I gave him a list of this is what a vet does, etc. But once I got hired, obviously they got me to do so many things, including moving animals and elephants and giraffes. But then one thing that they did, they're like, now we have a vet, do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. but one thing that I did find out that though is I got a call 9 months into the job telling me the gorillas are sick. They have a strange disease. And this actually was a Peace Corps who contacted us. And she said to me that they're developing white scaly skin and they're losing hair. And so I was like, really? What could that be? So I went to a human doctor friend of mine who had also studied in the UK as a medical doctor in London. And I asked her, what is the most common skin disease in people? And she said to me, scabies. Because she said to me, low-income groups of people in Uganda who have very poor hygiene end up picking up diseases like scabies. So there's a drug for scabies, ivermectin, which you use in animals commonly. And I felt that I took it with me as we went up to investigate this case. And I happened to travel with a vet who had worked with cheetahs in Masai Mara, a Kenyan vet who had come to do a consultancy to evaluate the veterinary needs of the Wildlife Authority. So he had seen scabies in cheetahs in Masai Mara that are heavily visited by many tourist vehicles. And those that didn't have scabies. So he attributed it to stress. So we went to this group. It was down to 4 individuals and 6 people visiting the gorillas, and we felt maybe it's stress. It did turn out to be scabies because there were 2 other vets who came with us who happened to be tourists to that particular group, who Dr. Richard Koch recognized. And one of them was a small animal vet, and one of them was a zoo vet, Dr. Eric Miller and his partner, Dr. Mary Jane Goss. And so when we realized all of them, these 3 senior vets who accompanied me on this particular first time we ever carried out such an intervention in Buindi, when they confirmed to me that it really does look like scabies, then we ended up just treating that particular gorilla anesthesized. And then we ended up, we went back again a few days later and treated the rest. But in between, we examined samples from him, but the baby gorilla was dropped. And when we did a post-mortem, the mites were still crawling after the baby had died. And they were scabies mites. The next question was, where did it come from? And eventually, we found out that it came from people living around the park who have very little health care. And yes, they do have, being low-income groups of people, they don't wash their clothes often, they don't bathe that often, and there was a high incidence of scabies in the community. And so everybody asked me to lead a health education workshop to kind of talk to people about, how they can be healthy and hygienic so people don't pick up scabies. But there's no open defecation in the garden, which is what you find. There's a case of open defecation. There's a case of people leaving out rubbish. So there's lots of things that gorillas could get when they go into people's gardens to eat their banana plants. And so I led this effort. I went together with a community conservation warden and ranger who talked to the communities about the benefits of the wildlife and how they can benefit from it, and how tourism can support community conservation, and how they can access these tourism funds. But then also we went with the district health assistant who deals with the healthcare of people. And at that time, I didn't realize it was a One Health team. It's now considered a One Health team. Vets, medical people, public health experts, and conservationists going in one team to work together. And so they came up with a lot of great suggestions of how we can improve the situation, better than I was going to propose for them as a vet. And I thought that was another eye-opener, that when you engage in communities, you don't impose your solutions on them. Let them come up with their solutions. You can point out the problem, but the solution needs to come from them. And so whatever they proposed was generally a One Health blueprint. They kind of said things like, we want health services brought closer to us, because I didn't realize that they were so far away from the nearest health unit. And when someone falls sick, they have to carry them on a stretcher for 20 miles. So some of them end up just not going to the doctor. They didn't want to make the gorillas sick because many of them were already beginning to realize the benefits of tourism. They were like, or at least they had heard that their neighbors across the forest were benefiting from tourism. So they were willing to listen to what we had to say. The second recommendation was they wanted continuous health education. And then the third one was they wanted to strengthen the human gorilla conflict resolution team that heads gorillas back to the park when they come out. So that was the third recommendation. And we went to 8 villages and spoke to over 1,000 people, and they came up with similar recommendations, and we grouped them up into those 3 categories. And a lot of what they said is what led us to, in my mind, I thought to myself, it would be good to start an NGO that focuses on these issues. So after leaving the government, after 4.5 years, and doing a zoo medicine residency in North Carolina, I decided to focus my research in the zoo medicine residency program and masters at the North Carolina Zoo and the North Carolina State University. I started to do One Health research. And so I decided to focus on tuberculosis, because if TB got into the gorillas, it's difficult to treat gorillas for 8 months, which is 1 dose of ivermectin actually worked. But with TB, you have to give them treatment every single day for 8 months, or maybe every 3 days if you give them long-acting antibiotics. But for a wild animal, you'd dehabituate them. They wouldn't stay there any longer. So I was like, okay, TB is a good one, also because it's a disease that was pretty prevalent in the Ugandan community, in low-income groups of people, and there was a big TB and HIV co-infection. And HIV, Uganda was the most open about the HIV, pandemic, and if you could call it that, but HIV epidemic. And we thought that Uganda was, because we were open, we got a lot of support. But I just looked at what are the main health issues in the community and how can they affect the gorillas and other wildlife. And so my research also taught me a lot about the public health issues in the area, because we interviewed people going close to gorillas, including the park rangers and the communities where gorillas are always going out. And I used the same district health assistant to help me point out areas where communities are always interfacing with gorillas, plus the community conservation ranger, the same team we had worked with when we did the health education workshops. And then I also looked at tuberculosis in cattle, buffalo, and people, because we found out that people are sometimes eating buffaloes and getting sick. They could get tuberculosis directly from eating buffaloes in the park, or by drinking the milk of cattle that have tuberculosis, and this cattle could have grazed with buffaloes. So it was it taught me a lot about how the public health system is working in Uganda. And in Queen Elizabeth, they did have someone watching you taking your medicine for 8 months to make sure you take it so that you completely get better. But in Bwindi, those people are not yet there. It's a system called community-based direct observation of treatment for short course therapy. In Bwindi, they were not yet there. And some people, like I went there over 2 summers to do the research. People who I met in the summer, the first year, I went back the second year and they had died, which really touched me. And the reason they died is because once they felt better at the hospital with 2 months treatment, they discharged them and sent them home. And they're supposed to come back every 3 months for testing with a friendly neighbor watching them taking medicine. But this time around, there was no friendly neighbor in the Bwindi side where the gorillas are. And these 2 people died, who I was tracking from the first year. So one of the very first programs we felt we needed to set up was the CB dots. So it was through all these experiences that I really discovered that you can't keep the wildlife healthy, especially great apes, when the people who are living next to them are not healthy. But also people can easily pick up diseases from wildlife as well. And so we felt that this NGO should prevent disease in both directions because it's better for the health, welfare and well-being of the animals, the people and their livestock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's something that I think it's really powerful, and I think it's, I guess, easy to understand when you, with those examples, exactly why this is important, because it's we don't exist, and it's always something that's interesting in any field of study, I suppose, that in academia and in kind of certain circles, I feel like everything is kind of siloed into, we study this thing, these people study this thing, these people study that thing, and like each individual thing. But the world doesn't work like that. Veterinarians and human doctors need to interact, and all of these conversations need to be had interdisciplinarily, if that's a word, to ensure that this work is happening and that we have a full painting and picture of everything that's going on. Because yes, it's really interesting, and I think the examples you gave were really interesting because, yeah, it's easy to picture. I think because we can see ourselves in great apes a lot of the time. We can see the way that they act is familiar to us, and that we kind of they look after their young, and they kind of act in ways that as humans we look at and we see ourselves, and so we can see them getting the diseases that we get because we have that connection already. And but it's interesting to hear then the other examples, I suppose, that contrast that, like the cheetah example you mentioned, or the kind of cattle and kind of bovine strains as well, because it's interesting to hear then that no, it's not just the great apes that can this impact, it goes beyond that, and that we are all connected in this system. And it's really, really interesting, really, really fascinating work. Something that you said that I kind of was intrigued by was kind of like you worked with local communities a lot, and kind of to come up with the kind of solutions and the things that you needed to work with. I wonder, kind of going the other way, obviously you can work with local communities to a certain extent, and then but also I suppose there's maybe a point where you want to work with government as well, or policymakers. Is that did you communicate in both of those directions? And I suppose what were the differences in the ways that you communicated? Was it a challenge to kind of do kind of work with these two very, very different groups of people, I suppose?
Yes, actually, having been a government officer, a government, wildlife vet for 4.5 years, I only saw the perspective of what it's like to be on that side of the coin. But then the TB research I did, in between, opened up my eyes, because we started engaging communities. And one community really didn't want us. They were not interested in us at all. One was happy to see us, the one around Bwindi, because they're getting a lot of benefits from the park. Because when that national park was created in the 90s, it was all about engaging communities in conservation. And 90% of the people employed in the national park were from the local community. Former poachers were being hired as rangers. We used to call them born-again poachers. Earning more money, protecting wildlife rather than killing it. So there was a nice, people were excited that gorillas are there and we're finding another way to earn a living. Whereas in the older parks, the Queen Elizabeth National Park, where I first went as a high school student, it was different. They were created in the 50s, when it was fences and fines, wildlife in, people out, people arrested. The only way of managing wildlife was through law enforcement. And so when we started the TB research in Queen Elizabeth, the cattle keepers the first year, they wouldn't allow us to touch their cows. And I thought, okay, I'm coming back in the second year. So instead of trying to push the issue, let me understand why they don't really like the park and why they're reluctant for us to sample their cattle. Because we had a questionnaire asking about tuberculosis and conservation issues that are affecting them and public health issues. And so it gave me a better understanding when we came back the second summer, how to engage them more effectively. But even in engaging them more effectively, we had to work with the government. They really loved that vet, the district vet officer, because he was always out there helping them. He's a highly dedicated vet. Dr. Godfrey Kalule and Dr. Tumushabe. So when the vet said, we're not lifting quarantine until we see your cows, it was quarantine for foot and mouth disease, and knowing that these are their vets who care about them, they were like, they knew that I was a vet, but they were like, just like wildlife. So you're not going to, you don't care about domestic animals, you only care about wild animals. And I said, no, actually, I'm a vet. I'm trained to treat all animals. I like all animals, whether they're wild or domestic. I'm concerned with the welfare of all animals. But then having the district vet with me, we're able then to sample their cows. We're able to start treating their animals. And later on, we really worked closely in that community, we helped to set up community animal health workers who we taught how to treat the animals for simple ailments, animal husbandry, deworming, and now they really like us. But it took a while to get to know them. In Buindi's situation, the domestic animal vets never used to come out there. They never, because it was so remote. It was much more remote than Queen Elizabeth. So what we did is to work with the government, we brought the district vets there for the first time. And he was like, wow. And he had so much knowledge. But he said the reason he didn't go out there is it's a lot of 1.5 hour drive. He said, I can't drive for 1.5 hours to treat a chicken. The chicken is not worth the fuel of driving all that way. And he had just never been to Windy, but he was fascinated because he realized, wow, the gorillas, they're bringing in a lot of money. People have cows, goats, let's start working with them. But but what we did in conservation through public health is, we brought the human health authorities together with the wildlife community, the wildlife management community, and the livestock health community. So then we started to engage, whenever we had a meeting with the village health and conservation teams, we started off by calling them community conservation health workers, where we basically got people who could improve community health and talk about and community conservation attitudes at the same time. So we got them to hire one person from each village. They're actually the ones who said, we want to hire one person from each village, not hiring, but recruiting, because they're volunteers. Get them recruited, get them to talk to their community about good health, public health practices, because they didn't want to make the gorillas sick. Some of them were already benefiting from tourism, but also they realized it's good for them too. And so that person was promoting good health and hygiene. They also promoted why we should protect gorillas, why we should be healthy and hygienic so we don't make them sick, but also why we shouldn't go into the forest to poach, because you can pick up diseases from other species, such as, the bush pigs, the duikers. But then also they also talked about why we shouldn't cut the forest and, other things around conservation, water catchment, forest protection. And so that group of people we started to work closely with. But whenever we have a meeting with them, we always involve the government people. We bring in the wildlife authority, we bring in the district health people, and sometimes you also bring in the district veterinary authorities, depending on the topic. But at a bare minimum, we always have health people there, human health people there, and wildlife management people there, because we want to show them that we are all working together. So as an NGO, we have played a role of bringing together these different disciplines at meetings. And at these meetings, they'll train people or they'll discuss their issues. For example, there's a case when people were like, we want to go into the forest to access medicinal plants, because that's something they used to do before it became a national park and they weren't allowed in. And so the warden would say, there are areas where we allow people to go in for medicinal plants that are not tourist zones, but why don't you plant some of these plants in your own garden so you don't have to always go in to collect them? You'd have discussions like that. And then the human health people would talk to them about, please look out for people in your communities who are coughing, refer them to us in time. And then we even started to talk about family planning later on when we got additional funding from USAID. The first funding we got to strengthen community-based direct observation or treatment came from the Irish government and Development Corporation Ireland. And that was really exciting. It was a very fast public health funding because they wanted to support healthcare, but they wanted the environment to also be protected. So they liked our project because it was also doing something for the environment, the gorillas. So we got our very first public health funding from the Irish government, which was fantastic. And then, so it's been like it's been like a journey. And that's why the subtitle is The Journey of an African Wildlife Vet, because we've been discovering One Health as we went along and how to work closely with the human health authorities and the wildlife authorities and the veterinary authorities to bring everything together and the benefits it brings for all the animals and the people and the environment and conservation. So it's been a journey all the time. And, and that's the thing I've noticed is that you may propose something, but when you get on the ground, you realize, actually, this is more useful, or this is a better way to do it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been a very interesting journey, but it's a very exciting journey, and it's still continuing, actually.
Yes, I was going to say that it's probably a journey that will never fully be done. It'll be something that you'll have to pass down to the next people and the next people and the next people, because it's one of these things that will, every iteration, hopefully it will get better and the collaborations will become stronger and everything will become more of a system that works together, whereas you had the really tough job of having to start that ball rolling, I suppose, and get it all kind of start that journey. And no, it's really interesting because actually for me it's really interesting because obviously this whole podcast started as a kind of investigation in during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, into the pangolin specifically, and maybe it was having a rough time at the time this kind of came out because there was that perception of it being linked to disease. And so it's interesting to hear about the behind the scenes, all of the thought process and all of the different groups and all of the different actions that have to take place to get this kind of thinking and this ball rolling. And yeah, as the pangolin, I suppose, proves, as the journey will keep going, because these things will keep cropping up, whether it be in gorillas or whether it be in pangolins or whether it be in whatever the next species might be. These things will keep happening. And I guess,
Yes.
how do you see, since you mentioned the journey continuing, how do you see this concept and everything evolving in the future? Is it something that you kind of have thought a lot about or worry about, or is it something that you kind of think, okay, now we've got a good set of tools maybe to deal with it? How is it, what is it kind of that you think about the future of One Health and how it will develop?
I would say that One Health came into maturity during the COVID pandemic. I was talking about it with vets who I've worked with. Some of them have mentored me. And we were just saying that, it was somewhere in the middle of the pandemic, like 2021, where we just said to ourselves, I think One Health is coming into maturity because of the pandemic. Because before you tell people that you're addressing human health and animal health together, they're like, you're crazy. When you'd talk to donors and say, human health donors, and say, can you fund, prevention, gorilla health, gorilla conservation? They're like, we're not animal people. We don't fund animal work. But then when you go to conservation donors and say, you need to support people who are unhealthy and they're making gorillas sick, they're like, that's public health. We don't fund people in that way. Yeah. That's public health. But during the pandemic, people are like, now we see what you're talking about. Because, although it hasn't yet been proven where the SARS-CoV-2 came from, but the previous two strains, which are very similar to SARS-CoV-2, which is SARS, which basically, came from the intermediate host was a civet cat. It was a bat coronavirus. And then MERS in Middle East, where the intermediate host was a dromedary camel. And over here, started somewhere in China, from what we see. And the pangolin came up as, the intermediate host is probably a pangolin. Then there was no proof for that. And we're still searching for the intermediate host. But there's more and more, the search continues. And actually, I was very excited to serve I'm serving on the World Health Organization Scientific Advisory Committee for Origin of Novel Pathogens, which came about in 2020, I think it's towards the end of 2021. They were like, now we need to prevent future pandemics, and we need to set up frameworks that can prevent future pandemics, as we're still looking for the source of COVID. So we were assigned to help to set up frameworks to prevent future pandemics, but also to try and advise on future studies to find out the source of SARS-CoV-2. And so, like the COVID pandemic, we don't know where it came from, but all we know is that it spread very rapidly in people. And now then it started jumping from people to animals. Whether it's people back to animals or people to animals, it's still a big debate. But it did jump. It just showed that it can cross between species, And the gorillas was a victim. The gorillas in San Diego Zoo and Zoo Atlanta got COVID from asymptomatic keepers. The mink, so many mink got COVID and had to be cowed, unfortunately, in Denmark and the Netherlands. And other species as well. A lot of people's cats and dogs, had antibodies to COVID, and deer in America. So it's showing that it jumps between species. And when it jumps to a next species, it can mutate further, then it's harder to treat and vaccinate against. So it's a fear, but the way it's played out, and it's been a long time, a lot of these other diseases would last for a short time, but COVID has played out a long enough time that everybody's understanding One Health much better. That if you want to keep people healthy, animals have to remain healthy. You have to attend to animal health. If you want to keep animals healthy, you have to attend to human health. And that really reinforced what we've been doing for the past 20 years. Actually, this year we celebrate 20 years of conservation through public health, which is very exciting. So it's been a journey, and an exciting journey. And as I said, where do I see it going in the future? I think there's going to be a lot more, there's an increased awareness about this. There's increased awareness that zoonotic diseases are very important for conservation, for not only for public health, because they affect humans and animals, but they're important for conservation. They're important for tourism. They affect the travel market. They affect sustainable development. They can bring countries to their knees. Economies as big as USA and UK have been brought to their knees because of the COVID pandemic. Even China is struggling with it. So it basically shows that in the future, we really need to pay much more attention to zoonotic diseases, and preventing the next one, because it paralyzes not only the health of people and animals, but it paralyzes economies, and which leads to so many other detrimental benefits. Just in Burundi alone, poaching went up during the COVID pandemic, and a gorilla was killed because of it, Rafiki, and so it's I think in the future people are going to see a lot more how One Health is beyond just disease, but has so many other things involved, and more the field of practice is going to expand and integrate other sectors as well. That's where I see the One Health field going.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really interesting, and again, really interesting examples, and that interesting to hear. How you brought it back to the pangolin and all of these things, because it's something that we hear about more and more, and I think with the public consciousness around it, you had kind of people talking about the kind of pangolin and trafficking during COVID and all this sort of stuff, and now I don't know if it's similar for where you're based, but it seems now every time there's an outbreak of anything, the media is talking about it more than they ever would have before. So, for example, in the UK right now, there's a lot of talk around avian flu and how that's kind of jumping between species. And I think it was found in seals recently, which obviously live around the coastal bird colonies. And so all of these things tend to be talked about more, which it doesn't make it better, but it encourages more people to think about it, I guess, and more people to talk about it, and hopefully results in more work being done on it in the long term, which is really important and really, really, really interesting. Really, really interesting.
Actually, everyone thinks that avian flu, some people think avian flu could be the next pandemic if we're not careful. And I was interviewed about it, actually, at the Royal Vet College, where I went. We had an event there last week, and I was interviewed about it. By CGTN, and it was interesting. They talked about avian flu, and so did someone who interviewed me in the Observer magazine. So I think it's the next fear. Because it can jump between species. Any disease that can jump between species and to humans is something that we really need to worry about. And there's Ebola, there's Marburg, there's anthrax, there's a whole range of diseases, rabies, so many, brucellosis, tuberculosis, scabies. And the list, unfortunately, is getting longer of emerging and re-emerging infections. So we need to be much more careful.
And I guess it's a tricky one, because normally at this stage in the interview, I suppose I would ask if it's somebody talking about local conservation in terms of species that are in people's back gardens or whatever. There's obvious things that maybe the listeners can do, and we can talk about solutions that maybe everybody can be a part of. But I guess for you, that it's maybe less clear in this scenario, but you talked a little bit, I guess, about did you say 20 years of your organization?
Yes.
Which is, when it comes to acronyms, I always mess them up. CTPH, which I didn't get the letters mixed up. And it's really, I work for the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh, which is RBGE, and the number of times
Whoa.
I've called it RGEB or RGE, I just get them all mixed up. So yes, 20 years of your organisation, CTPH, and so I guess that's how you look at solutions. That's how you look, I guess, towards maybe like people can be more involved in organisation like that. Like, could you tell us a little bit about what that does? And I know specifically you kind of do work with coffee and things. So could you tell us about that?
Yes, at CTPH, Conservation Through Public Health, we have 3 integrated programs, and one of them is wildlife conservation with a focus on wildlife health and habitat protection, and then community health with a focus on One Health, where we look at disease of people, animals, and the environment together, and other issues around it. And then we have alternative livelihoods, which came about more a few years after beginning focusing mainly on wildlife health and community health, because we realized that the gorillas are species and wildlife are species, but they live in a habitat. And as long as the habitat is not secure, the species are greatly threatened. And so that's when we started to look at things like promoting community-based family planning, where people can now have the children they can manage, so they don't have to always enter the forest to poach and collect firewood. But then we also started alternative livelihoods, where people can get, a good price for good coffee. Often when you're going to trek and visit the gorillas, you always cross coffee farms, and you're finding that those farmers are not getting a fair market or a steady price, and they're still entering the forest to poach and collect firewood. And so we give them a good price for good coffee, and a donation can also go to support the work to improve community health in the same communities and gorilla health and conservation education. So we do, with the gorilla health program or the wildlife health program, we basically built a gorilla health and community conservation center at Windy. It's a field laboratory plus a community education center mainly, where we regularly analyze non-invasive fecal samples from gorillas to check for diseases they could be sharing with the local community or the livestock or just amongst themselves. And then this enables us then to know whether we should get the livestock dewormed and the local community dewormed, so the gorillas are not picking up human parasites or any other disease. And during the COVID pandemic, there was a big focus on testing the gorillas for SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID, along with the community, making sure that the health authorities test the people who come close to gorillas, and making sure that we act ahead of time and prevent anything big happening, prevent the gorillas picking up COVID. And so we do a lot of health monitoring in the wildlife, checking out for clinical signs, but it's not just us to do it. We do a lot of empowering the community to take care of their own wildlife, including the health of their own wildlife. So we have gorilla guardians who are trained to herd gorillas back to the park. We train them to also monitor the health of the gorillas when they're in community land and collect fecal samples from them. And even if they're abnormal, they can tell us they're abnormal, and then they're monitored more frequently. Then the rangers are the main people looking after the gorillas, and they're trained in all of this. And they're also trained to manage tourists, because a very big issue that came is the threat has always been the tourists can give gorillas diseases. As much as the poor community public health was leading to gorillas picking up diseases, but also the tourists, if they come, they can cough on the gorillas and give them a fatal disease like COVID, and they can die. So we have to be very careful. And so we train the rangers to manage tourists. When they come, they all must wear masks. Mask wearing started during the pandemic. They have to wear masks. They have to maintain a distance. It's always been 10 meters, but sometimes it's broken by people or gorillas, because gorillas are very curious and they're friendly and accommodating. But as people have to wear masks, they have to be healthy when they visit. The temperatures are taken before they go in. And so there's a lot more emphasis on, health care for the people to protect the gorillas as we monitor the health of the gorillas. So those are kind of our 3 main integrated programs. And the way that we can get a lot of people to help is, we do get a lot of tourists who visit from all over the world, from UK and all over the world, and they come and they learn about our work. They can visit our Gorilla Health and Community Conservation Center. They can give a donation. Some of them volunteer. They come later on and become volunteers in various expertise. We also engage school children in the conservation education programs, and we teach them to Sometimes we do it through sports, like there's the Windy Kids League, Impenetrable Kids League, which a volunteer helped us to start up, Guy Hodgkinson, based in England, with his parents. They helped to sponsor that. We also more recently we've worked with organizations like Disney to continue to grow the program with other schools. But we've also worked with, more recently, National Geographic has funded a STEAM project where we're doing science, technology, engineering, math, but also adding art and working with 10 to 24-year-old groups, getting them to come up with projects. So people can support in many ways. We had a vet student recently who we were looking at bacteria in the people and the gorillas and the livestock. And this particular vet student was also interested in education. So she went and did a session, helped the kids to come up with nice drawings and things, in one of the schools, because she liked that as well. So we do encourage all kinds of, volunteering. We have research partnerships with universities in UK and US and other countries. We also encourage people, of course, to buy the gorilla conservation coffee wherever they are. Yeah. Because even if you can't visit the gorillas, you can still support them by buying the coffee, because you prevent someone going into the forest to poach, to collect firewood, because we're able to pay them then a good price for good coffee. So there are also many different things that we do. And whatever expertise people have enables us to engage the communities more meaningfully and to protect the gorillas better and other wildlife. So there are many different ways that people can get engaged, but they can also spread the word. They can sign up for our e-newsletter. Sorry, these are my dogs.
I wondered what that was.
Please. Off. So they're being very... So those are all the different ways that we can engage people in our work. Visit our website, follow us on social media, and they can also buy Walking with Gorillas and learn about all about our One Health approach to conservation and which really is a detailed personal account of this journey.
That's perfect. I think that's actually that's so interesting, and I think it covered so many things that people who are kind of interested in a way of conservation where they want to kind of equip themselves with knowledge can get involved. If people want to buy stuff and support financially and are able to do that, they can do that as well. So it's really a perfect answer to that question. And yes, of course, the links for all of those things will be in the description of this episode. So if people are interested in the book or the coffee or anything else, I'll put all of the links in the description. So listeners, go down, you can click now, purchase the book, and do everything else, because it's been fascinating. It's been really, really fascinating to hear. I guess
thank you so much. We have a great distributor in the UK, Manny Robbins. They also ship to Scotland. They're based in Maidenhead, and I did an event there as well. And she started during the pandemic because we were stuck with the lack of tourism. Yeah. People poaching went up because people were used to getting money from tourists to buy food, and now there are no tourists because of lockdowns all over the world, and also want to protect the gorillas from human disease. And then in May 2020, she placed the first order so we could at least keep the coffee farmers growing. And then in June 2020, unfortunately, the lead silverback of Kirigo Gorilla Group was speared by a hungry bushmeat poacher. And then we realized that people are poaching because they're hungry, and we started to provide fast-growing seedlings to them. All through the pandemic, Vicky from Manny Robbins has placed so many orders, over 15 orders now, and it's just kept going. So it's some of the, even providing ready-to-grow food, fast-growing seedlings, is something we're continuing beyond the pandemic. And that's something else that became part of our One Health approach to conservation. And that's why I'm saying One Health is continuing to evolve. Responsible tourism has become a part of it, food security, because we're promoting responsible tourism to great apes in all the countries in Africa that have great apes, working closely with International Gorilla Conservation Program. So they help to set up tourism in Uganda, and we are now taking the lessons learned from Uganda to other countries where people have gorillas and chimps, so that people have to go ready to wear masks, ready to maintain a respectable distance, but also ready to buy crafts to give back to the community. Because when a community member meets a tourist and they give them money, then they're much less likely to enter the forest to poach, because they benefited directly.
That's really fascinating. And I was going to ask about tourism actually. So you've already kind of beat me to the question of like, how did you see tourism evolve? Because you mentioned how it can be, it's changing. And so it's interesting to hear like how it is changing and exactly why it is changing and the benefits of it adapting and how it can benefit everyone. So that's really fascinating. Really, really fascinating.
Yeah, this is a policy brief we developed during the pandemic, both in English and French, because most of the wildlife is found in Francophone and Anglophone countries. And we were trying to basically, it was geared towards the government, donors, and tour operators, so tour companies that bring in tourists, because they're the ones who market the experience before the tourists arrive, but trying to get people to come in ready to be a responsible tourist. We also developed a website called protectgreatapesfromdisease.com, and that website it was developed in a partnership with the University of Exeter, because they work with chimpanzees in Guinea-Bissau, Kantane National Park, where there's a small level of tourism, and they asked us if we could partner with them to develop this whole website. We also worked with One Health Vet, who Dr. Fabian Liandetz, who used to work for Robert Koch Institute, and he does a lot of primates and zoonotic disease work in West Africa. So we kind of all got together and came up with this website, protectgreatapesfromdisease.com.
That's really fascinating. And I'll put that in the description for anyone who's curious to go and like have a look and learn more, because that sounds really, really interesting. Really, really interesting.
Dr. Kim Hawkins was working in University of Exeter, and she kind of led the effort from that side. So again, it was, a great ape primatologist working together with vets and One Health experts to another One Health initiative to come up with protectgreatapesfromdisease.com.
Again, the benefits of breaking down those silos and talking across disciplines seem like, if you can get the language and everybody understands and everybody knows what we're doing and it's fantastic. That's really, really interesting. Really, really really interesting. And as someone who works, a lot of my work that I've done is interdisciplinary in nature, so I'm loving all of these good examples that I can now use whenever I talk to people about it and go, look, it works. We can make things that really, really function well if we talk to each other. It's fascinating. I guess I'm looking at the clock, and unfortunately we're kind of running out of time, and so there's a couple questions that I usually kind of ask everybody to wrap up the conversation, and so I guess we should move on to those. And if you want any more details, listeners, about any of the stories we've talked about so far, get the book, read the book, and then I'm sure you will fall in love even more with these stories and be even more intrigued by them. And so the questions that I want to ask you now, though, are the first of them I've asked everybody this series, because this series has been a celebration of the continent of Africa and conservation stories that take place in all of the different countries up and down that continent. Though it's such an incredibly biodiverse place, there's so many different kind of biomes and things up and down, and so many different species and things to love, and we can't cover them all on the podcast individually. So I'm asking everybody, what, if you could highlight one of the species on the podcast, an underappreciated African species, what would it be, and why would you want to highlight it?
That's a very interesting question. I would say that I always tell people that the gorillas don't live in the forest alone. Yes, they're the flagship species at Bwindi-Benchogo National Park, which has close to half of the world's 1,063 mountain gorillas. But we also have in there chimpanzees, elephants, over 200 species of butterflies and 300 species of birds, and four monkeys. But we also have species like the pangolin. The pangolin, which is one of the most widely trafficked species in the world, now, following the elephants and the rhinos, is also found in windy forest. And you see them on camera traps. So one time we were having a TV program called Engine Science Show, which is focusing on getting children to engage in science and to love science, especially girls, getting girls engaged in science. So they look for female role models as scientists to go with children. So I happened to go with 2 children from Bwindi community, 2 teenagers, plus my teenage son and his younger brother, who was 11 or 12 at the time. So Tendo was 11 at the time. So we went to windy, and we went into the forest. And what was interesting is, although the whole program was focused around gorillas, the 11-year-old wasn't allowed to see the gorillas because you can only see them when you're 15. So we gave him the role of, because of childhood diseases and behavior disturbance. So he has to wait till he's 15 because before he can see the gorillas. So he was given the role of setting up the camera trap close by the edge of the forest, where we know that there are no gorillas there were no gorillas ranging there at that time. So he, as we're getting ready to do it, somebody came with a box, and inside was a pangolin that had been rescued from the local community close to the border with Democratic Republic of Congo. And as we went in to set up the camera trap, they needed the camera we had to picture this pangolin being released. So we had the opportunity to see the pangolin being released. As we were able to hold the pangolin, they were all able to feel the scales. What does it feel like? It was a really fascinating science lesson for them. Then we released the pangolin, and it made people realize that this forest, yes, it has the mountain gorillas, but it also has rare, endangered species like the pangolin that need to be protected. So it was I feel that we should throw more light on that. They're difficult to see. It's hard to say that you're going to have them for tourism, but they're such an important, species in the habitat, and they're playing their own important role in the habitat, and they need to be protected and not trafficked around the world. And it's great that you're focusing on them. And you love them. You should come out to Uganda and see the gorillas. We may promise that you may see a pangolin, but we can't commit to it.
I will turn up. People keep saying this to me on the podcast of like, you should come and visit, and I will. One day I will come. I think now I've got like 5 or 6 countries. I'll need to do like a tour of Africa down, I think, Namibia, South Africa, and then up to like Uganda again. And then there's definitely a tour that needs to be done, because I think, it would be fascinating to see. And it's amazing to hear you kind of mention them, because I feel like, yes, it's the name of the show. We have to get as much promo for them as possible. And so, yes, it's fascinating and interesting to hear such a like personal story. And I feel like actually the 11-year-old got the best deal in the end. If he got to see a pangolin, which is probably the gorillas he'll probably be able to see a bit easier when he's 15. The people who go in, like most people will not see a pangolin. So that's incredible.
I know his older brother wrote a book, actually, Zookeeper for a Week, when he worked at the zoo for a week. And so
amazing.
And now his younger brother got to see a pangolin. So it's very rare species to see. Unfortunately,
that's fascinating.
But so important and so endangered. As well, just like the gorillas.
Yes. I guess then that leads us to my final question. And the final question I always like to ask everybody is kind of for a bit of advice for listeners, people out there who have been inspired, if they're listening, what they can do. And I think specifically for you, because we talked at the beginning, I guess, about you saw yourself in these kind of like fascinating and amazing and incredible women like Dr. Jane Goodall. And when I've mentioned that you're coming on the show to like colleagues, they've been like, she's amazing. Like, I don't like it's, and they talk about how like, and it's amazing how you have kind of broken down barriers in what is a field that is largely dominated by men. And so I was interested to hear from your perspective, maybe advice for the people who are now looking up to you as their Dr. Jane Goodall. What would you say to them as like some, like, if they're looking for advice to keep them going or to pursue a career in the field?
Oh, thank you. I would say that being focused is really important. The words that Dr. Ververt Monkey wrote in a book that I bought from her when I was a vet student was follow your dreams and the rest will follow. And I believe that has really guided me. Yes, I was doing something very unique at the time. I was training as a vet, which also there were very few female vets in Uganda at the time, very male-dominated field. But then not only was I training as a vet, but here I am becoming a wildlife vet, the first wildlife vet in the country, trying to convince people that we should treat wildlife when they're thinking, no, wildlife should be left on its own. What are you doing treating wildlife? And just, being really determined to see it through and not get discouraged or distracted easily. So I would say that, for people out there who want to follow this field, especially young women, follow your dreams and the rest will follow. The right partner will come along. My husband is we met, we got married just, I would say, he was the first donor to the NGO. I'd say he donated to the new nonprofit I was beginning with $100 from him and $100 from me. We put up a bank account in the US just before we got married. And so he's been with me all through, and he initiated the Gorilla Conservation Coffee Social Enterprise because he came more from the corporate sector. So it's the right partner will come along who will help you to follow your dreams and achieve your dreams. So I think that's what I would really like to say to most young women. Don't worry, don't get so discouraged by what society thinks you should or you shouldn't be doing. You should just continue to follow your dreams and the rest will follow.
That's perfect advice. Perfect advice, I think, to wrap up on. And I think something that all of us can think about, whether they are thinking of pursuing specifically a wildlife vet career or whatever the career is. I think that's something that a lot of us can take away and think about. I guess then, before I say thank you, a huge thank you for being here, I want to give you one last opportunity. Tell people, where can they get the book? Where can they follow you? Where can they learn more about your work? Like, is there anything else that we've not mentioned yet that you want to promote? Is there anything that people should go and look up?
Yes, well, thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. The book can be, Walking with Gorillas can be found on Amazon, and please buy it and write a review. It's also available in the UK in Waterstones and Blackwells and Heifers. Actually, all three bookshops helped during the book tour I've just had in the UK, either by bringing books to like the vet school or to Emmanuel College in Cambridge where my brother went in the 70s, or just at the bookshop. But you can also find the book in independent bookstores. I know somebody interviewed me and said she got it in an independent bookstore, so they're available there. And in America, it's available on Barnes & Noble and many other independent bookstores like Vrooman's and Tattered Cover and the Gibson's bookstore and Boulder's bookstore, and lots of places. It's found in many independent bookstores, but also in other countries around the world on Amazon. I think as I speak now, there must be about 70 or so places you can find it. And it's just got to Uganda. We're having a book event next week. It's in Uganda at our Gorilla Conservation Cafe in Entebbe, where we only serve coffee from the farmers where gorillas are found. But it's also going to be in the Ugandan bookshops like Aristoc. It's already at Mahiri online bookstore. And we're hoping it will be available in exclusive books in South Africa and some bookstores in Kenya, Nigeria, and other countries around the world. I know it's already there in Australia. I don't know whether it's online version or the hardcover, but it's set to go to India, Japan, Australia, and other countries. I'm really grateful to Skyhorse Publishing. They've got an amazing distribution network, and they've really, really helped promote the book. They're a wonderful publisher. On top of getting me to write the book I want to write, they also really helped promote it all over the world, in America and other countries in the world. So I'm really grateful to them and to the book editor, Lily Golden, and to Naz, my book agent who's based in UK. It's been a very exciting journey. Catherine Menon, who's hoping to make sure it's distributed everywhere. We're always on conference calls with her. She's like, we need to get the books there in time before your event, before this. So it's I've actually learned a lot. Like, I know what it's like being an author. Is not just writing the book, but you spend almost as much time promoting it as writing it. I'm finding out, which no one told me about. No other author told me about this. But I used to always see Jane Goodall going around the world, promoting her book and giving talks. And I'm like, I didn't realize. She didn't tell me when she said congratulations on publishing your book. She didn't tell me how much time it's going to take promoting it. And so when one of the talks in Boston, a lady who's now a professor at Tufts, she's an older vet who I've known for many years, Dr. Felicia Nata, also worked with wildlife, gorillas as well, mountain gorillas in Rwanda. She's done a lot of work with wildlife in America and Africa. And she kind of said to me, she came to the talk, she's like, you're now like Jane Goodall, because she had first worked with chimpanzees in Gombe when I met her. And she's really, Jane Goodall has really inspired her, and they know each other. She's like, you're now like Jane Goodall, and so I was like, it looks like I am, giving talks and selling books and promoting, doing a lot of awareness and advocacy, protecting species. I've been very inspired by her. In fact, at the Edinburgh Waterstones, somebody she worked very closely with, Dr. Anthony Collins, made opening remarks about me before we had the Q&A with Cassie from M&J. And he said to me, which was so interesting, is that they noticed that there was a young Ugandan student who was always coming to the talks of Jane Goodall. And that was me so many years ago. And then, and she did say to me when the first talk that come and visit us in Gombe. But it's interesting how he said they noticed that I was always appearing at her talks and wondering, so they started following me closely. And that was very interesting. He focused on baboons, and he's the world expert on baboons, Dr. Anthony Collins. He also is living in Edinburgh right now.
I'm going to write that down as a potential future guest for the podcast.
He would be fantastic. He would be fantastic, actually. He has a lot of experience, having worked in Gombe since the 70s under Dr. Jane Goodall.
That's fantastic. That's his name is written down, so he'll be getting an email at some point from me being like, excuse me, sorry to be a bother, but I think you'd be a great guest. No, that's fantastic. And yes, it's been so good to chat and hear all of your stories and everything that you've done. And I can't wait to my first stop tomorrow morning is going to be the Edinburgh Waterstones that has the signed copies, because I want my own signed copy that I can sit somewhere and be like, I know, I've talked to her, she's amazing. So no, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here.
And I also just wanted to mention that my mom has been a great inspiration in my life. I've been so lucky. She's supported me from the very beginning, even if I wanted to do something that the society in Uganda thought was strange for a woman to do. And she just supported me. Even when I said I want to be a vet, and other people said you should just be a medical doctor, because vets were not considered important enough in society. But I said I don't want to see animals suffering, and I want to be a vet. So she's been great, and she went to Edinburgh University with my dad in the 50s. So she was so excited that I was back there in Waterstones and giving a talk at the bookstore, and I was there a year ago when we won the Edinburgh Medal for planetary health. And so she was also so excited about that. And she
that's amazing.
The Edinburgh Meadow Science Festival took me out for a celebratory dinner last week, which was also very exciting.
That's amazing. And yes, shout out to all of the mums out there actually who push us to be our very best and encourage us to do all these amazing.
She wrote an autobiography,
things.
My Life is But a Weaving. She was one of the first female politicians, and the time she spent in Edinburgh really empowered her. She came back as a female leader, and she's now become one of the female icons in Uganda, who's encouraged many women to join politics and be part of the women's movement.
That's amazing. I need to get her on I need to read this. I need to there's a whole other podcast here that I want to hear her story. This is amazing. That's fascinating. And I can't thank you enough, because I'm gonna I feel like we touched on some heavy topics, but I love when I come to a podcast and we talk about interesting, difficult things, but I still leave with a smile, because you've been such an inspirational speaker. So thank you so much for telling me all of these things, and the way that you talked about it has been so beautiful and fantastic, and I know the listeners are gonna love it. So thank you so much. I will put, as I say, in the description of this episode, I'll put all of the different things that you've mentioned down there, so people can go and look and learn more, find the book, find the coffee, find all of the different things that you've done.
And they can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and also on LinkedIn as well.
Yes. And while they're there, they can follow us as well, because we're at Pangolin Podcast on all of those.
Fantastic.
They can just get a little bit of self-promo in there as well. They can do that. And yes, so thank you so much. Thank you, listeners, for listening. As I say, follow us on social media. Please subscribe and leave a nice review for the podcast if you've made it to the end, because it's been so great, and you are one of many fantastic guests we've had on the podcast this series. So listeners, go and investigate other ones if this is your first time here. But for now, all that remains, I guess, for me to say is another huge thank you, Gladys, and a huge thank you, listeners. And until next time, goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much.